So I figured I would upload. I know I look kind of bad, and I sound kind of rough. I actually just have a sore throat because I've been coughing a lot. It's a normal side effect from chemo, and it does not provide for optimal video uploads. So I feel okay. I just have had coughing and hiccups, so um, not great for videos. So Um, we actually had kind of uh, not a layoff, but just kind of like people got sent home early. So I'm done for the day at work, and it was perfect timing because my voice was starting to go out. So I just wanted to talk about something. Today is the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and I was watching that on Deutsche Welle, the German news, and it made me think about some things. So when when I was in high school, um, in the synagogue, there was a girl named Jenny that was running for running for youth group president or something like that. And Jenny was she was my sister's age, so she went to junior high school. I didn't know her. And I really wouldn't have paid it much attention. She had little flyers up around the synagogue, vote for me. You know, my little sister said, oh, yeah, she's one of the popular kids at school. My mother took attention to that because she had a Dutch last name. And she's like, oh, that girl's Dutch, you know. So um, I was like, oh, that's interesting, you know, okay. And I wouldn't have really paid attention either because I was a senior in a high school and you know, was a 12th grader when I hang around like little 8th and ninth graders, you know, at a different school, you know, that's somebody my little sister would have hung around with. So, um, I didn't really think much about it. I never really thought about Jenny again until years later. You know, when I got back from Israel, I heard about Jenny, and it was kind of in the context of a friend of mine named Marty, who passed away during a surgery, the routine surgery. Or, no, it was an elective surgery, but people were talking about that, and then they brought up Jenny. And the context of Jenny was that Jenny passed away at a very young age of cancer. And this had brought up a big community wide effort was because Jenny needed a bone marrow transplant and they couldn't find a match for her. And they had reached out to the community, and it was in the newspapers that nobody had a match. And this was a very big deal because Jenny didn't have any extended family. She just had her immediate family. And this was something that really hit me because, and this is a source of contention with my first cousins too, is that when you have a last name that is ethnic and you're Dutch, it's kind of a normal experience to grow up without second cousins and without third cousins. And it doesn't even occur to you that other people have them. Except that I do on my dad's side, you know, and I have a lot of them, including my Jewish great grandmother on my dad's side. And their family's kind of prominent in the Midwest. They work in the education system, and you can almost dox me just based on that, because there are so many schools that are named after them. They're school teachers. So, um, I went to the Holocaust Museum in 1999, and they had a library on the fifth floor, and did some research, and a little bit more information has come to light since then, and it was a little bit more complicated than what I thought, and we have consulted with genealogists, and what we thought maybe was not what we thought. It's complicated, but we don't have extended family either, and that's that's a thing in the Dutch Jewish community. It was a big Jewish community before World War II, and uh, there are like 120,000 Jewish people in the Netherlands, and then after the Holocaust, there were 10,000 people left in it, and my mother's family was in Indonesia, and this was something that came up when I lived in Israel, is that most of the Dutch community in Israel is from Indonesia, and they had about 30,000 people that survived World War II in Indonesia, and that was separate from the Dutch Jewish community in the Netherlands. And these were people that had kind of questionable, like, are they legally Jewish? And then they had to go through conversions and all that. And it got very complicated and everything, but everybody was in the same camp from the Japanese, and they all had the same story about the camp guard that did something at the end of the war with a samurai sword and a motorcycle. And he unalived himself on that in a ritual samurai way. He was a very brutal guard, and everybody had that exact same story. So everybody was in the same camp, and they were put in there because of their last names. So they all have that same story. And they had been put in that one camp together because of some determination that had been made that they were to be isolated in that one camp. And I don't really know the whole details. Somebody was working on a book about it back then, and this was over 20 years ago, and these people were elderly back then. So, I don't know how many of them are still alive. Um, During the news report from Auschwitz, they said there are only about 250,000 Holocaust survivors that are still alive. So that's from the entire experience, and that includes people who were sent to the death camps in the German occupied areas. That includes gulags, and that includes the Japanese camps as well. And so that's worldwide. So even, 60 years, because that was 20 years ago, 60 years afterwards, people are still dying of cancer because they can't get genetic matches for bone marrow transplants. because they don't have enough relatives that are genetic matches, because all their relatives were killed off in the Holocaust. So this affects people. 60 years later might be affecting people 80 years later. That's something, that's a legacy of the Holocaust, how it impacts people decades and decades and decades later. And I'm not going to say what my mother's maiden name is, because it is very ethnic, and we're not really sure what the origin of it is, whether it is a Jewish name or whether it comes from a town in South Africa. We're not really sure, because the genealogists said it's complicated, and this came from 3 different genealogists. So what I do know is that I'm a descendant of the Dahan family, and there were hundreds of Dahans that were killed in Sobibor and Auschwitz. So those were my relatives. We do know that. And I do know that I didn't have second or third cousins on my mother's side of the family. I do know that. Where were they? Whatever the genealogist said, where were our third cousins? Second cousins has a simple explanation, is my grandfather only had one sister, and she died very young. But the third cousins, where were they? What happened to them? So and this is a thing that impacts people decades later. It impacts. They were talking about how one of the survivors was telling about how she was told not to fidget or cry while they were being selected, who lives and who gets turned into smoke. That was in one of the speeches, and it clicked with me, because I got berated for crying about things when I was little. My temperament is not even an emotional temperament, but I can't cry about things even as an adult. It's very difficult for me to show emotion and everything, because of how my mother raised me. And that's not normal. That is absolutely not normal. My mother was a child and witnessed things. Not that my mother didn't tell me about this. I learned this from people who grew up with my mother, and these are things that that I grew up with the effects from that, and it still impacts how I react to the world around me. And people might say, "Oh, that's autism or something." No, it's not autism. It's a thing called the second generation war survivor syndrome, and it's that's really common among people who had parents that went through that experience. Um, before you start judging people for their behavior, find out what their parents went through, and what they went through. If you're Gen Z and you see this, when you judge your Gen X parents for how they behave, maybe find out what their parents went through when they were children, what your grandparents went through, and how that impacted how your parents behave and reacted to that. It's not everything is autism. Some things are trauma responses. to just absolutely horrific things. I don't know everything that my mother went through in a war. My mother did not tell me about it, and Dutch people are very secretive about that. They don't want to traumatize their children. And I know my mother got very excited about seeing that Dutch name on that girl's little flyer running for youth group president. I never met Jenny. My little sister knew her. She seems like she was a very dynamic person. She made a big impact on the community, and even though she did not survive her cancer, what happened impacted the whole community there, because of what happened to her. There's a bone marrow registry in Northeast Florida because of her experience. And I wanted to talk about Jenny today. I'm still in my PJs, and you know, but I thought this was important enough to mention on the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, because Jenny was a victim of the Holocaust, just like the 6 million Jewish people and the other 3 million people that were Romani and other minority groups who also perished in the Holocaust. Jenny was a victim of the Holocaust as well, because she had no family members who could donate a mural to her that matched. And the reason for that was because anyone that might have been born with a matching mural was never born, because her extended family was murdered in the 1940s by the Nazi regime. I don't think that's a word I'm allowed to say. So they that legacy lives on. And we witnessed something a couple days ago in the United States, and people are defending that. That kind of thing is why I don't want to stay in this country. That's dangerous, and it is something that frightens me. I think when we say never again, we know that's not true. In 1392, the Jewish community was expelled from France after centuries of being very comfortable there. The chief rabbi just a few hundred years earlier, he said, go falconing with the king of France. And then in 1392, they were expelled. They had to move to Poland as refugees. And I'm sure everybody said, never again, never again. We won't let that happen again. And almost the day, 100 years later, it happened again. They were expelled from Spain. And my ancestors, the De Haans, fled to the Netherlands. It happened again. 100 years later. So things can happen again in living memory of that. There was a 99-year-old Holocaust survivor that spoke at the Auschwitz memorial ceremony today. He was 99 years old. He's an OBGYN from Poland that fled to Sweden in the year that I was born, actually. And that's a lifetime. 99 years, that's a lifetime. He's still alive. So, I'm sure that everybody was saying never again in 1392. And then in 1492, it happened again. It's 80 years. We've got somebody flipping his wrist up in some kind of a salute. 80 years, almost the day of when Auschwitz was liberated. living memory of that event. Is it a never again, or is it a twice in a lifetime thing? And I'm not even going into what's going on in Eastern Europe. That's another thing entirely, but, you know, but I wanted to talk about Jenny. It was important for me to get this up today because, you know, that is how that impacts people. People can't get their marrow donations because of this. And my vlogs are about cancer and how that impacts people. I am losing my voice. This is, you know, this is very melancholy for me. I can only take things about the Holocaust in very limited amounts. Psychologically, it's too much for me. And this is probably one of the few times I'm going to be talking about the subject. It was traumatic for me when I did that research at the Holocaust Museum. It was very traumatic. It took me months before I was able to like get through a lunch break without going over there and lighting candles at the museum. And I still can't use a copy machine without having flashbacks about it. It was that traumatic. So it's, you know, there are people that went through that experience as children that are still alive. There are some adults that went through that experience that are still alive. And there are people that were born long afterwards that are still dying because of not having enough relatives to be able to save their lives. So it's very real. It's not fabricated. It's real. So I'm sorry to be kind of glum today. It is a kind of a grim day, you know, because people are remembering what happened. And it was a very horrific thing that people did to other people. And if you have a chance, you know, and this is not being sponsored or anything, but if you have a chance, check it out on Deutsche Welle. I believe they have clips on YouTube. They also have a channel that you can watch on Smart TV. But it was a very touching ceremony that they had. And it was an amazing ceremony. Anyway, have a good day. And I am alive. I just have a very sore throat. I probably won't be uploading for a couple days just because my throat hurts really bad. So